Hi guys. Hey, all right. This morning we're going to be doing freeCodeCamp, factorialize a number, and reversing a string. So let's get right into this. This is going to be the first two challenges for this freeCodeCamp, basic algorithm scripting. All right, so let's get you over to freeCodeCamp. All right, so here we are with reverse a string. It is going to be the first challenge here. And right away we are given string.prototype.split, array.prototype.reverse, and array.prototype.join. Okay, so what are those things and what are we trying to do? So let's take a look at what they want from us. They want to give us an input string such as hello, howdy, greetings from Earth, and they want us to output using a function the reverse of that, all those letters in reverse order. So how can we do that? Well, we got a clue right here. It says let's start with a string method. So it says string.prototype.split. So let's go over here and see what that is. So right now we have the string.split, and you get a separator and an optional limit. Okay, so right here the separator specifies the characters to use for separating the string. And the separator is treated as a string or a regular expression. Now, the regular expressions I'll go over a little bit later on, but for right now, we just have to know how we want to split up this, whether we want to split it up by each individual string object, or maybe we want to split it by a space, let's say. Here's a good example down here. So let's look at the string here, and it says let's split this string. All right, and so what are they trying to split here? So here's your Tempest string, and they want a "Oh Brave New World" in it, and they're going to be showing you how to go through and console log the original string and a string to split. And they're going to give you a separator. And what is that going to do for you? Well, there is a bunch of stuff we can go through and read. I'm trying to find you something that's easier to look at. There we go. Aha, this is what I want. So here's my string, hello world, how are you doing? And so we can split this by, well, it just has a single quote, a space, and another single quote. So what that's going to do is it's going to separate by every time you hit the space key. So there's a space, there's a space, there's a space. And now we have this right here, and this 3 says do that 3 times. So the first 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3. What do you get when you apply this? You get hello, world, period, and how. All right, and those are string objects now in an array. So it takes all of these objects and it puts it in an array. Pretty useful. Okay, so that's good. So now we have an array. What's that going to do? Well, it's going to tell us that we want to apply a string method to split. Okay, so then we know that the prototype split generates an array. Now we can do an array method called reverse. Now, reverse does just what it says. What does reverse do? It reverses the order of the array. Remember, an array, this is your 0th position, your first position, and your second position. And notice that my second position here, when I reverse it, goes all the way to the 0th position. All right, and the 0th position goes to the end, and so on and so forth. So if we separate everything by each individual element in that string and reverse it, we can reverse all of the letters. Well, that leaves us with one problem now, where you have an array, not a string, and we want to return a string. So they give us another array method.
The owner of a black Chevy Cruze, license plate number C92GXU, please call 3036. The owner of a black Chevy Cruze, license plate number C92GXU, please call 3036.
Thank you for interrupting. Anyway, that's what happens when you work at a school. All right, so as I was saying, the last thing that they give us is another array method, prototype join. So what does join do? Well, join simply takes an array and joins it into, okay, so we have wind, rain, fire, and it joins it each individual element together into a string. Now, we can just say join and it will stick everything together. Also, we can join it with something in between each separator. So we can actually add a separator in if we want. So if we want to add in this case, a dash or an ampersand, so on and so forth. So that's a pretty simple one. And just as you might imagine, we have a function now that we're starting with, reverse string. That reverse string takes in an argument. Now, an argument, remember, is not, okay, that's not a variable. And if you can kind of think of the difference between arguments and variables. A variable holds information somewhere, okay? And an argument is sort of the workflow for the data, okay? So that's what you're going to do with all of the information that's inside of a function. So they're kind of similar, so I can see kind of how people get those mixed up, but just remember the str that's in here is an argument that's going to be taken in. This can be a variable, it can be another function, it can be whatever you want. I can always go into that a little bit later on if we need to. So I don't really want to return the argument, which is going to be, we know it's going to be a string going in. What I want to return then is that argument, okay? And I want to take that argument that I want to reverse, and I know the first thing I want to do is I want to split, okay? And I want to split that by every single element that's there. Notice I'm going to put nothing in these quotes. So just every little piece of that, every letter that it has, or every space that it has in there, I'm just going to split and grab each individual thing. From there, now we know we have an array. So once I do that, I can apply the array method reverse. Okay, so there's your reverse. So now I reversed all those positions in the array from our 0th to our last, all right, our second, third, so on and so forth. And we have to bring that back together into a string by using our join. Again, I don't want to add any separators or anything in there. I just want to join it right back together. And let's see if I have this. So we have a reverse and join. I don't want to add in any separators in there. Ta-da! So that adds in nothing. And if you take a look at just what happened there before, if you don't add anything in, if I take these out, you can kind of see what I got. I got each of these separated by a comma. All right, so that's how come you have to make sure you put a separator that is nothing, a separator of nothing, essentially. And that way you can go ahead and get this. Okay, Thundercats, ho, awesome. Now, factorialize. We're going to move on to factorialize. What they give us is a bunch of arithmetic operators. Okay, so what does that mean? What is an arithmetic operator? It's just a way that we can do math inside of the computer. But more importantly, what we need to know is a piece of information that's not here. And the piece of information that's not here is this, our for loop. Now, the for loop, you're going to be using this a lot. And a for loop takes in 3 separate parameters here. You have an initialization, a semicolon, a condition, and then a semicolon, and then a final expression. Okay, and then you could put your statement in there. So what are these things? All right, so an initialization is a declaration of some sort or a variable that we're going to be using to iterate through this loop. We have a condition, which is an expression to be evaluated before each loop iteration. If the evaluation evaluates to true, the statement is executed. All right, and I'll be getting into that a little bit more later. And then the final expression is what happens at the end of the loop itself. And what do these loops generally look like? They usually look like this. For var I equals 0, I is less than 9, I plus plus. Okay, so if you were to console log I, okay, what would you get? Let's see. So when we start this for loop, we're setting a variable to I. It equals 0. Okay, that's 0. That's our starting point. I is less than 9. Is I less than 9? Well, 0 is less than 9, so we're good to go. We're going to continue on with this for loop for this step. And we go inside and we console log I, and we will get in our console log 0. Now, after we go through this section here, we go back up to the top, all right, in our for loop, all right, and it says, once we finish this out, I plus plus. What does that plus plus do? I plus plus is a shorthand for I equals I plus 1. So we just add 1. That's what plus plus does. It adds 1. So now our variable I has a variable of 0 plus plus or plus 1, which is 1. Is 1 less than 9? Well, yes, it is. So we're going to continue down here in console log I. At this point, it is now 1. What do we do now? We go back up here, and it says I plus plus. It was 1 plus plus, which means we add 1, so now it's 2. Is 2 less than 9? Yes, it is. We're going to move down inside, and you'll console log that again, and you'll get I as 2. All right, so that's just, and so on and so forth. What happens when you get to 8 here? Okay, once it gets to 8, you'll go I plus plus. You'll get 9. 9 is not less than 9, and the loop will end. So how can we use this to factorialize a number? Well, what is a factorial? Well, a factorial here, so n exclamation point or n factorial, or here's an example, 5 factorial, because 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. You should have had that in your math class somewhere. So how are we going to work this? So let's take a look at this. So we're going to be taking in an argument num, right? And we don't want to return that argument. What we want to do is we want to do some math with that. And so I am going to get rid of this, and we have to figure out what to return. What I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable, and I'll just call it f for the factorial math that we're going to be doing, and I will set it equal to, not equal to 1. Why am I going to do that? Well, if you look at the factorials start with 1. And so if you're factorialing 5 factorial, you're not going to start with 0, all right? Because then if you multiply 0 at the beginning of this, everything will be 0. It always starts with 1. So since 1 is our starting point, I'm going to create a variable f for my factorials just because it's shorter, and I'll set that to 1. And again, I don't know, that's going to be outside the scope of the for loop, so it'll still be useful inside of the function and inside of that for loop. So here we go. We're going to do that same for loop. And remember, there was var I equals, well, do we want to equal to 0 here? Well, we don't want to equal to 0 because we're going to be multiplying stuff together. So we're going to want that equal to 1. Okay, and then we have a semicolon. Then the next is the statement that we are going to check. So how are we going to do that? Well, what I'm going to do is, if you notice, if we start multiplying with 1, we have to go all the way through and add 1 to things we're going to multiply until we get to the number that's being that we're taking the factorial of. That number that we're taking the factorial of in our function is going to be the argument num. So we want to keep doing this as long as I is less than or equal to num. And again, we're using num as our check to make sure that we are just going to keep taking 1, then add another one to it, then add another one to it, then add another one to it, and multiply all that stuff together. And that's how we're going to get our factorial. And then how do we know what number is going to be our factorial? Again, that is our argument num, and that's going to be our check right here for our for loop. Okay, I'll add a space in there so it's a little easier to read. And then what are we going to do? Well, if you remember, we're just going to add 1 every time. So we want to start with 1, then we want to multiply 2, then we want to multiply 3, then we want to multiply 4. How do we do that? Well, we're just going to be iterating through our loop using I. So I plus plus. Okay, so there's the start. And let's open up our curly braces. All right, give ourselves some room. And what are we going to do? Well, we know that we're going to start off with a number. What number are we going to start off with? Well, we're going to start off with 1. So how do we start with 1? Well, right now I'm just going to use f. All right, and f is going to be the placeholder I'm going to use for my factorial number. And at the end of this function, I'm going to be returning f. So this is going to be the factorial. So this f here, if you take a look at my equation here, is going to be this right here. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. So now how do I get 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5? All we have to do is f times, so what is times? Note above the 8 key, it's that little star thing, the asterisk, and multiply that by I. And that is it. So how does this work? So we start off, I have the accumulator here that's going to just be accumulating all the values that I started, and I set it 1. Okay, so in the beginning, this is 1, f equals 1. So we're going to go in here, set a variable I equal to 1. So in the beginning, I equals 1. Is I less than or equal to num? What is num right here? Well, in this case, we're going to bring in this argument 5. Yes, it's less than 5. So let's bring it in here and say that f now equals f, which is 1, times I, which right now equals 1, and our total is 1. Okay, that's our starting point. Now what do? We go back up here, I plus plus. Now I is 2. Okay, so is 2 less than or equal to 5? Well, yes, it is. So we go back down here and we say f, we're going to set it equal to f, which is 1, times I, which is now 2. And what is our new value for f? It is 2. All right, is good. Up here, I plus plus, I now is gonna be 3. Okay, so 3. Is 3 less than or equal to 5? Well, yes, it is. Our new f is going to be f, which was 2, times I, which is now 3. 2 times 3 is now 6. Now f equals 6. And you can see how we're going to iterate through this loop and keep adding these numbers to multiply 2, right? Then we multiply 3. Next, we're going to multiply 4. Next, we're going to multiply 5. After we multiply 5, our I plus plus is going to make our I 6. And 6 is not less than or equal to 5. So we will exit our for loop. And then in our function here, we're going to return f, whatever that is, which should be 120. So if I did all this right with no syntax errors, I can just hit this and coding spree, success. All right. So hopefully that was informative. If you have any questions, you can just let me know. I'll be happy to help you with this. And then hopefully I will see you next time, and we'll be working on the next set of challenges. All right. See ya.